the sixth Sunday of Ordinary Time. Last week, we had Excuse Sunday. Peter saying, "Depart from me, I have a good excuse." And Isaiah, "I have a good excuse. I can't speak holy because I am not holy." Today, maybe this Sunday, we will have Compare and Contrast Sunday. In the first reading, which I highly recommend reading, it's a very short reading. The comparing is a tree in the wasteland, in the desert. And he says it's like a person who is self-contained or trusts in just the humanness of things, trusts in another human being for identity, or I trust in what I can do to be my identity. I am what I do, and I am as long as I can do something. And if I do the good, I am good. And he said, no, contrast that with a tree who receives. It's near the running water, and it provides fruit and shade. It is not self-contained. It is receptive. And maybe what we can pray with in the readings today is the difference between grabbing or getting and receiving. What's the difference between those two? So in the first reading, it's the tree gets and keeps to itself. Getting and grabbing is about me. It's all about me. It's not about, if you receive, you will want to, in a way, what we say is, it's not a gift until it is shared. So I receive things like the tree receives the sun and receives the water from the stream, and of course it offers its fruitfulness to others. It's not trusting in itself. Now the gospel is also contrasting. It's not the Sermon on the Mount. That's Matthew's gospel, where Moses is typified by Jesus up the mount. Moses who gave the law, Jesus now gives the new law, which we call the Beatitudes. And the Sermon on the Mount is 5 chapters. Chapter 5, 6, and 7 in Matthew. In Luke, it's very short. It's a shorter review in chapter 6. He has just blessed or called his disciples and his apostles. And it's very interesting. Moses was up the mountain. Jesus was up the mountain. In Luke's gospel, he's on the level, which is a great image that Jesus is speaking them on the level ground. And there are great crowds around, but he addresses this to the disciples. And it's not the complete Sermon on the Mount, happy are you, happy are you. He says, the very first one, happy are you if you receive. That is, your poverty leads to receptivity. Happy are you if you are not grabby, but receptive. So that's what the gospel is about. So blessed are you, happy are you, if you are poor enough to receive, if you are hungry enough to be fed, if you can stand against, if you know who you are, so that when people speak ill of you, you still know who you are. Imagine that. That I am what I am by the grace of God, as Paul said in last week's second reading. I am what I am, and no one can take it from me if I've received it, if I've accumulated, if I've built it, if I've grabbed it, it can be taken away. But if I've received myself, if I receive myself in prayer and in contact with Jesus, and if I receive him to receive myself in the Eucharist, then when people speak ill of me, they don't know who I am. And then he's got contrasting those who are poor enough to receive, the woe to yous. Woe to you if you have accomplished yourself. So you have the tree and the woe to yous. The tree by the desert, not receptive. And you have the apostles and the disciples who are poor enough to receive, like a tree receiving water, the leaves receiving sunshine. So you have, in a way, Jesus has the sad attitudes, not the happy attitudes, but the sad attitudes. And attitudes, the woe to you are if you've got everything, you think you have everything, you've grabbed everything. You'll be sad because you have to protect it. You'll be frightened that people will find out that you are not very much because you've gotten your identity from the flesh, from accumulation. So it's quite a challenging attitudes. This is just a little aside, but how do you get an attitude? I think because actions flow from attitude, attitudes are arrived at by how you answer questions. What is this? Who am I? My attitude will be, am I poor enough to receive who I am? If I am poor enough to receive who I am, then my actions will be, I will distribute it. But if I am frightened of who I am and I accumulate myself, I will be like a barren tree and I will keep myself to myself. My actions will flow. I will be those that Jesus says, woe to you because you are very lonely, very by yourself. You are very protective. You have walls of fear of really being known around you. So you can pray with the contrasting and the comparing. Two kinds of tree, two kinds of people. And the challenge is, do we grab ourselves, accumulate ourselves, or are we blessed because